I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times with Arkansas News headlines. On Tuesday, April the 14th, Governor Asa Hutchinson today named 3 special justices to hear the weird little offshoot case from the same-sex marriage case. This is a separate case that will decide which justices will actually decide the same-sex marriage case. You may remember that Paul Danielson and Jim Hanna got off this separate case created by 4 of the justices because they thought it was a delaying tactic and perhaps unethical, just a means to delay this case until after the U.S. Supreme Court rules. In any case, the governor appointed 3 people, 2 of whom have overt Republican ties. One is Circuit Judge Sean Womack from Mountain Home. He's interesting because when he was in the legislature, he introduced a bill that would make it illegal for homosexuals to adopt children. And this was based on the fact that he believed marriage should be illegal and only married people should be able to adopt. So he's going to decide who will hear this case. This case is not about the underlying issue, but if he's making any guesses, as the rest of us are, about who goes which way on the Supreme Court, it gives some reason to doubt the impartiality of his decision. Same thing for Betty Dickey. She's a former appointed Supreme Court member. She's also a former Republican candidate for Attorney General. She also very recently endorsed Leslie Rutledge for Attorney General, and it was a motion by Leslie Rutledge that created this very case which she's just been appointed to. Also, young Cersei lawyers have been appointed to the case. The judges give some reason to doubt Asa Hutchinson's decision to say that he thinks maybe it's time to talk about merit appointment of judges. If his merit appointments include people with such obvious conflicts, maybe election isn't so bad after all. On another topic, Little Rock schools. Late last night I got word that there was going to be a story in this morning's newspaper, the Democrat Gazette, about radical restructuring plans for 2 Little Rock schools, Rockefeller Elementary and Baseline Elementary. Baseline is one of those in academic distress. It's not particularly surprising that there are going to be reorganization plans. What was surprising was that the news came out first in the newspaper before parents, students, or staff at those schools knew anything about it. The Baseline school is going to be totally remade. The existing staff is going to be moved out. The principal is going to be moved out. This is also interesting because there's several of us, including me, who've made Freedom of Information Act requests repeatedly to Dexter Suggs, who's supposedly running the school district, and the state education department about plans for reorganization, about replacement of principals. They said there were no documents responsive to this request. I finally got documents today that showed that simply was not true. It was a lie, frankly. There were documents that shows at a minimum changes were going to be made at Baseline School. The state is off to a terrible start in keeping the public informed and proceeding in a proper, compassionate, and efficient way about dealing with the new schools. It's not a good thing. This brings me to an interesting poll that was released today by Talk Business and Hendrix College and Impact Management. It was about education, and it found that most people in Arkansas like their own schools, but they think education in general is headed in the wrong direction. This is called the congressional effect. You like your own congressman, but you don't think the rest of them are any good. Unfortunately, I think this applies in Little Rock. People have been fed a steady diet that the Little Rock schools are a problem. So out in the rest of the state, they think, oh, they don't really care what happens to Little Rock schools. Yet the majority of this poll said they don't think the state education department should run schools. They think local people should. I know that's certainly how people in Little Rock feel today, but they don't have much sympathy out in the rest of the state, unfortunately. Elsewhere, check into the Little Rock website, the city government website, at 4 p.m. today if you can stand a little city government dosage. And here are a couple of interesting topics. One is going to be an update on the tech park. 4 years after the city approved a sales tax increase to build a tech park downtown, really nothing has happened, except a lot of talk. They're getting a little closer, but now we hear they need a new building to be constructed so that we can have sufficient pure wet lab space, it's called, rather than just renting some existing office building. This could be a problem because the $22 million the city expected to produce for this project is not likely to be that big. Sales taxes haven't been coming in as expected. The other big item on the city board agenda tonight is the first reading of the ordinance that would extend civil rights protections to sexual orientation and gender identity for city employees. It would also require people who do business with the city to pledge to not discriminate against people on these grounds. That's big news. It could put the city in place to be part of a lawsuit that challenges a new state law to take effect later this year that prohibits such local ordinances that expand civil rights protection. It's a small step, but a big step. My sources say the ordinance has a good chance of passage. So far, only Joan Idcock, who doesn't like much of anything, has expressed any outright opposition to it. Maybe she'll even be brought around by the time they vote next week. In other news headlines, some quick briefs perhaps here, if I can only read my notes over here. Oh, a new report from Wallet Hub shows that Arkansas is the absolute worst return on the tax dollar for taxpayers. That is, our tax rates are pretty high, particularly the sales tax, which really hurts poor people, and the public services that are delivered in return for these taxes. Well, it makes us the worst place in the country to live in terms of value of our return on investment, as they call it. There's an interesting lawsuit filing yesterday in Fort Smith. Matt Campbell, a Little Rock lawyer who does the Blue Hog political report, says the Fort Smith Police Department tried to infect his computer with malware so that it could hack into his hard drive and mess up his system. He's filed a suit against that police department over the firing of a police officer. It's a pretty strong allegation. It's interesting, this police department has said they will not comment for now. You'd think the police would want to say flatly they would not engage in such illegal activity. We've announced a series of sessions on the Common Core curriculum. Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin is going to lead what he calls a listening tour and public hearings. The full schedule of those events, which start next week, is on our Arkansas blog. Bad news for Razorback basketball fans. Superstar Bobby Portis announced today on Twitter that he's going to pass up his last 2 years at Arkansas and go pro and get into the NBA draft. Not really surprising. There's a lot more money there than he could make by staying around in Arkansas 2 more years. And finally, an interesting little story you'll find also on the Arkansas blog. A Japanese woman has been named Miss Japan Universe. She's of mixed heritage. Her mother is Japanese. Her father is a black man from Arkansas who currently lives in Jacksonville. She spent a couple of years of her high school life in Jacksonville and worked here as well. She's been the subject of racial discrimination, not so much in America because of her Japanese black heritage, but in Japan, where they have some funny thoughts too about racial purity. So it's sort of a worldwide problem that we're still having to cope with. I'm Max Brantley. I'll be back tomorrow.